With Grumgully the Generous and Goblin Bombardment on the battlefield, cast any Persist creature. Sacrifice the said creature to bombardment, dealing 1 damage to target opponent. Due to Persist, our creature returns to the battlefield with a -1 counter. But thanks to Grumgully, it also returns with a +1 counter, meaning they cancel each other out and we're left with a fresh Persist creature. Repeat this process till all of our opponents are dead and we win the game. Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. In today's video we're going to be making our way to Combo Town with this new commander from Throne of Eldraine, Grumgully the Generous. At first look, Grumgully is your everyday normal goblin shaman just trying to pump up his goblin friends, but at second glance, he is ready to win quick through big combos by keeping our Persist creatures locked and loaded. A 3/3 for 1 generic, a red, and a green. Grumgully says each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. This deck is set to go off using this effect and 2 other integral pieces, Persist creatures and sack outlets. Generating infinite ETB and exit effects in combination with other spells can let us do all sorts of shenanigans, from creating infinite mana to milling out all of our opponents. So to make sure we have what we need for our combos, we're going to be running a stockpile of a ramp and card draw spells. And to really put the cherry on top, this entire deck can be purchased today for less than $90. But enough of the small talk, let's dive in, taking a look at the Persist creatures and sack outlets we're going to be abusing with Grumgully, starting with Oaf's Fury-Stoked Giant and Woodfall Primus. Oaf's we can sacrifice to itself to deal damage to a target creature with flying. This is great in the instance that we have some pesky flyers in our way. Fury-Stoked Giant is a 3/3 giant. It says whenever it comes into play, other creatures we control get tapped. This creature deals 2 damage to target creature or player until end of turn. And Woodfall Primus says whenever it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. Again, if we are able to continuously recur this, we can destroy everything on the board, including our opponent's lands. Then we have Thunderblust, Scuzzback Marauders, and Lesser Mana Core. Thunderblust is a 7/2 with haste, so we can swing with some damage and then sack it for its Persist trigger. Scuzzback Marauders, just a 5/2 with trample. And Lesser Mana Core, a new card coming out of Modern Horizons that when we cast it, we do have to discard a card. But early game, if we are able to get Lesser Mana Core online with Persist, it can win games on turn 4 or 5. And rounding out our Persist setup, we have Cauldron of Souls. This 5-cost artifact says tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains Persist until the end of turn. In the off chance we aren't able to get one of our combo Persist creatures, this will enable us to get there quicker through sacrificing our other creatures to draw more cards or gain more mana. Then we have our sack outlets that we're going to use to sacrifice all of our Persist creatures, starting with 2 free sack outlets on creatures, Bogardan, Dragonheart, and Thermopod. Bogardan Dragonheart comes out of Modern Horizons and it just says sacrifice another creature until the end of turn. Bogardan Dragonheart becomes a dragon with 4/4 flying and haste. And Thermopod is a 4/3 snow creature slug that says sacrifice a creature, add 1 red mana to your mana pool. So with Thermopod and our combo in place, we can generate infinite red mana using this creature. Then we have 3 artifacts, Ashnod's Altar, Blasting Station, and Altar of Dementia. Ashnod's Altar is going to help us to generate infinite colorless mana by sacrificing our Persist creatures. Blasting Station says tap, sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And then whenever a creature comes into play, we untap Blasting Station. So by sacrificing a Persist creature with Grumgully on board, Blasting Station is going to ping an opponent. Our Persist creature is going to return with no counters on it. Then we can repeatedly tap it, pinging down our opponents until we win the game. An Altar of Dementia, a sack outlet for 2 mana. It says sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of his or her library into their graveyard. So with our combo, we can sacrifice our creatures and mill out all of our opponents and win the game. And lastly, we have a few enchantments that are going to help us sacrifice those Persist creatures. Goblin Bombardment, Greater Good, and Betrothed the Fire. Goblin Bombardment is a powerhouse for 1 and a red mana. It says sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to target creature or player, so if we're able to get this combo online, we can sack creatures to it and kill all of our opponents. Greater Good is going to be a free sack outlet that's also going to let us draw cards. It says sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. This can help us sift through our deck if we're looking for those specific combo pieces. And then we have Betrothed of Fire. It lets us enchant a creature, and it says sacrifice an untapped creature. The enchanted creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And if we want to, we can sacrifice the enchanted creature, and all of our creatures will get +2/+0 until end of turn. Honestly, neither of the abilities on Betrothed of Fire are that good, but by being able to pay 1 and a red and then have a free sack outlet, it makes this a super strong card in this deck. But now that we've seen the combo to loop our creatures in and out of the battlefield, let's take a look at some of the enter and exit effects that we have in place to help us win even quicker. Starting with Pandemonium, Warstorm Surge, and Impact Tremors. Each of these enchantments deal damage whenever a creature enters the battlefield. Pandemonium is symmetrical though, so whenever a creature comes into play for anybody, they will get to deal damage equal to its power to a creature or a player. Warstorm does damage equal to the power of the creature to any target, and Impact Tremors does 1 damage to each opponent. With any of these in play in our combo setup, they win the game. Then we have 3 more enchantments with great ETB buffs: Mirror March, Guardian Project, and Rhythm of the Wild. Mirror March is a relatively new card coming out of Ravnica Allegiance that I think is a ton of fun, and I'm always looking for places to put this card, but it reads, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. With our Persist combo in play and this enchantment on board, we can sack a Persist creature, creating a Mirror March trigger, then sack it again, creating infinite hasty tokens and winning the game. I love this card so much, and I find it to be very, very fun. Guardian Project is going to let us draw out our entire deck. It says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, you draw a card. So with our Persist creatures going in and out of the graveyard infinitely, we're able to draw out our entire deck, get all the combo pieces we need, and win the game. And then we have Rhythm of the Wild, which is already a great enchantment, but in this deck, it is an all-star. Creature spells we control can't be countered, that's great, but the real added benefit of this card is that non-token creatures you control have Riot, so they can either enter the battlefield with haste or a +1/+1 counter. So if for some reason Grumgully gets removed and we have Rhythm of the Wild in place, it has a replacement effect that is exactly the same as Grumgully's, and we can continue our infinite combos. Next up, we have some creatures that benefit whenever other creatures die. Hissing Iguanar, Lumber Knot, and Overgrowth Elemental. Hissing Iguanar says whenever another creature dies, you may have Hissing Iguanar deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So again, with our combo in place, we're able to ping everyone down for 1 damage at a time and just win the game. Lumber Knot says whenever a creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Lumber Knot, and it has hexproof. If for some reason we aren't able to keep an enchantment or some way of dealing damage on the board, at least we can create a massive Lumber Knot. And with Overgrowth Elemental, its second ability reads whenever another creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. If that creature was an elemental, put a +1/+1 counter on Overgrowth Elemental. So with this and our combo, we can generate infinite life. And with infinite life and an infinitely large Lumber Knot, I can only imagine we are able to win games. Next, we have 2 more creatures that are going to benefit of all of our creatures dying and going to the graveyard. Rot Shambler is just a weaker Lumber Knot, but it says whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Rot Shambler. And Stalking Vengeance says whenever another creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player. For 7 mana, it's a little expensive, but it is a win condition in itself. And then we have 2 more enchantments that are going to benefit off of all of our creatures dying in Fecundity and Outpost Siege. Fecundity says whenever any creature dies, that creature's controller may draw a card, so enabling us to draw our entire deck and find the combo pieces we need to win. An Outpost Siege comes in, we can choose Khans or Dragons, and we will almost always choose Dragons, which says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And then to round things out, we have the Flayer of the Hatebound, who has Undying, so whenever this creature dies, if it had no +1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield. But unfortunately, with Grumgully on the board, it won't get that trigger. But whenever Flayer of the Hatebound or another creature enters the battlefield from the graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. This will trigger off all of our Persist creatures coming back from the graveyard. By now, I hope you've realized that all of our combos are pretty interchangeable. We are looking for a Persist creature, Grumgully or Rhythm of the Wild on board, a sack outlet, and either an ETB or exit trigger to round out the game. But to ensure we always have those pieces ready to go, this deck runs a ton of ramp and card draw. So let's take a look at that now, starting with Explosive Vegetation, Kodama's Reach, and Grow from the Ashes. Explosive Vegetation is going to let us search our library for 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Kodama's is going to let us search our library for 2 basics, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and 1 into our hand, and Grow from the Ashes for 2 and 1 green, kicked for 2, is going to let us search our library for 2 basics, put them onto the battlefield untapped. These are your pretty basic green ramp cards, but they are going to help us make sure we are able to combo off as quick as possible. Then we have some creature ramp, also ETB effects, Mina and Den Wildborn, Sakura Tribelder, and the Wood Elves. Mina and Den says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Also for red and a green, we can return a land we control to its owner's hand. Target creature gains trample until end of the turn. Good chance we're not using that second ability, but with all the card draw, playing 2 lands a turn is a huge deal. Sakura Tribelder for 1 and a green, we get a 1/1, but we can sack him to search our library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle our library. And Wood Elves says whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to search our library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle our library. We can double down on these effects by giving these creatures Persist using the Cauldron, or we can use them as fodder to our sack outlets. We've also got a handful of mana rocks with Soul Ring, Gruul Signet, and Gruul Locket. I'm not a huge fan of always running lockets in decks, but for only 6 cents and being able to dig for 2 more cards is a big deal in case we are needing to get those combo pieces to end the game. Next, we have 3 red sorceries in Faithless Looting, Cathartic Reunion, and Tormenting Voice. Each of these doing similar things, letting us draw cards and discarding cards, help us get through the deck and find the right pieces. And it is important to note that Faithless Looting does have flashback, so in the instance where we need to dig a little more, we can cast it again for 2 and a red. Harmonize, Thrill of Possibilities, and Signal of the Clans are 3 more cards that are going to help us make sure we get there. Harmonize is a green staple, letting us draw 3 cards for only 4 mana. Thrill of Possibilities, a brand new card coming out of Throne of Eldraine. At instant speed for 1 and a red, we are able to draw 2 cards by discarding a card. I'm actually surprised people aren't talking about this. This is strictly a better Tormenting Voice. And lastly, we have one of the best cards in this deck with Signal the Clans. Signal the Clans for 1 red and a green. We can search our library for 3 creature cards, reveal them, and if we reveal 3 creatures with different names, which of course we are, we can choose one of them at random and put it into our hand. With Signal the Clans on turn 2, you can find either the Persist creature you need or a sack outlet creature to really ensure you hit that combo on turn 3 or turn 4. But now that we've seen the combo pieces in this deck and how we're going to get them onto the board, let's take a look at what else is inside the 99. Our removal and control in this deck is relatively on the weak side, with only 6 to 7 targeted removal spells and about 4 board wipes, but we do also have lots of targeted damage coming from our combo pieces if we need to. The card draw package contains about 10 to 11 spells, and many of which can lead to us drawing our entire deck. There are also a couple tutors in this deck to really make sure we are getting the pieces we need when we need them. The ramp in this deck is aggressive with 3 mana rocks and then 5 or 6 additional ramp spells. We want to make sure we're getting these pieces on the board quickly to end the games even quicker. And the win cons in this deck are abundant, but it all can be broken down into 4 pieces in any combination. Number 1, we need Grumgully the Generous or Rhythm of the Wild. Number 2, we need a Persist creature. Number 3, we need a sack outlet of any kind. And number 4, we need a trigger from a spell, whether that being from creatures entering, exiting, or being sacrificed. You put all of these together and you just win the game. As you play this deck, you will realize that there are tons of combinations and ways you can put games away that you didn't realize at a first glance. But that is going to do it for this quick-footed combo deck. Grumgully at a glance may not seem like much, but if combo is your playstyle, then I definitely recommend giving this deck a chance. Some playgroups discourage against infinite combos, so if you decide to put this deck together, just make sure it fits into your meta. But if you enjoyed this content, make sure to hit that like button, and if you guys want to know when our next deck tech goes live, make sure to subscribe. If you're a Twitter user, head on over there, drop us a follow at EDH Tactics. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.